This week in chapter 6 and about half of chapter 7, what we're going to talk about is mainly the labor market, and we're going to actually continue that next week in chapter 9. The labor market is probably the most important single market for macroeconomics because it determines the unemployment rate, it determines how much people get paid, which of course then determines how much they can spend on other goods and services. So in chapter 6, we're really talking about the relationship between employers and employees, right? And of course, work is an important part of economics. It's an important part of people's lives. And the way we're going to think about this is both in terms of the strategic interaction between employers and employees, and also how much effort employees are going to provide to their employers based on how much they get paid. And we're going to see that in the labor market, there is a lot of conflicting interests, both from owners of firms and managers and employees. And so, how do wages get determined? How are people best motivated in order to work in the interests of the firm? So the model that we're going to use is different than a traditional supply and demand model. So you'll see that in some economics textbooks, the authors will just use supply and demand to model the labor market, where firms demand labor and workers supply labor. The problem is that a lot of things that we observe in the labor market are not that compatible with supply and demand. And so we have a different model here where the issue is that there are incomplete contracts in which firms can't completely control their employees, and so they have to pay more than the minimum in order to get employees to put forth effort. And then we'll see what happens with different institutions in place, things like unemployment benefits, the different unemployment rates and the economy, and how that affects wages and effort as well. So first of all, we want to start off and think about what is a firm, right? So a firm is a little bit unusual. It's one of the things that makes modern sort of industrial life different than it was before the industrial and capitalist revolution. So the firm is an organization which employs people. It purchases inputs in order to produce something, right? So everything from cars to TVs to restaurant meals to education, all of those things can be firms where they're taking inputs which are going to include workers and producing a good and service. And the idea is that they'll be able to set prices greater than the cost of production in order to earn a profit. Now, obviously, that's going to depend on how much competition there is in the market. If there's less competition, their profits will tend to be greater. If there's more competition, their profits will tend to be lower. So if we think about firms versus markets, the division of labor is coordinated both within firms and then across firms. And so within firms, it's really about sort of a centrally planned process where the firm gets to decide how many workers they hire, what those workers do, what kind of capital they use. And firms are therefore, in some ways, a little bit more flexible and more able to respond quickly than the market is sometimes. Whereas in a market, power is decentralized, right? So there's nobody making one decision in a capitalist economy. That would be more like a communist economy if there was some centrally planned government making decisions for the entire market. So if we think about the structure of the firm, usually we have owners at the top. And so in a small firm, we might not have a board of directors. We might just have an owner who is also the manager and employs the workers. But in big firms, we'll have some sort of board of directors whose job it is to represent shareholders. And of course, there's going to be some conflict even between the board of directors and the shareholders. And then the board of directors are going to tell the managers or executives what to do. And then those executives are going to tell the managers and then eventually the workers what to do. So it's the owner's job to decide on a long-term strategy. It's the manager's job and then the worker's job to assign tasks and do those tasks in order to work out that long-term strategy. So one of the biggest differences between the labor market and other markets is that Contracts are different. So a contract, of course, is just a legal document that says, all right, if you do this, I will do that. So if you provide me with 16 tons of copper, I will pay you this much. If I pay, if you pay me uh, $10 a month, I will provide you with Netflix services, right? So it's all about transferring ownership or providing a service. For labor, basically what we're doing is we're creating a contract that says, all right, you can tell me what to do within certain legal parameters in exchange for a wage. But the difference between these labor market contracts and other contracts, as we'll see in the next video, is that they are incomplete because you can't completely control what an individual does. There's also different types of relationships within a firm, right? So there will be a network of colleagues, and there will also be the skills that you acquire that are necessary to do the job. And there's going to be sort of two types of skills that will be important in the labor market. One will be sort of firm-specific skills or firm-specific assets, and when you leave that job, you sort of can't take those skills with you. They don't translate into the next job that you have. But then there will be general skills as well. And so firms are actually more likely to train workers for those specific skills than for general skills because they might worry that workers will leave and take those benefits elsewhere.